The forbidden veil, the great hall of the alien empire, was silent, so silent that the sound of a single breath could be heard. Thousands of eyes looked toward the high platform, where golden torches burned and shadows danced across the walls. The air smelled of metal, stone, and fear. At the center of the platform stood the one no one dared to face directly, the princess of the empire. Her body was still, her hands folded in front of her, and her head was bowed beneath the long silver-white veil that covered her face. No one in the empire had ever seen what lay beneath that veil. It was said that even her closest guards had never dared to look. The law was clear. To look upon her uncovered face was to invite death or perhaps something worse. The aliens believed that her hidden face carried a curse. Some whispered it could blind a man in seconds. Others said it would twist the heart with madness. And some believed it was not a curse but a power too great for mortal eyes to hold. Whatever the truth, the fear was strong enough to keep every warrior, priest, and noble silent in her presence. The crowd bent their heads as she passed.
Only one figure did not. A human stood among them, tall and quiet, his hands at his side.
His dark eyes followed her every movement. He had heard the rumors just as the others had. But unlike them, he did not look away. His chest rose and fell, but there was no fear in his gaze. His name was Marcus. He had come to this empire as an envoy, a stranger from a distant world where no veils covered faces and no laws chained hearts. To him, the idea of a woman hidden from the eyes of her own people was strange, almost cruel. He did not believe in the curse. He believed in something else, the truth. As the princess moved, the long fabric of her gown whispered softly against the stone floor. The chamber glowed in shades of silver and blue, the light flickering over the metal armor of the guards who lined the walls. Their weapons gleamed, ready to strike if anyone dared break the sacred rule. Marcus felt the weight of their stares on him. They all knew he had not lowered his gaze. His defiance was small, but in this hall it was louder than a shout. A murmur spread through the crowd like a ripple across dark water. Whispers in alien tongues carried a single meaning. The human was reckless. The human was unafraid. The human was doomed. The emperor himself rose from his throne, his tall crown of iron shining under the torchlight. His eyes narrowed as he studied Marcus. "Human," he said in a deep voice that shook the hall. "Why do you not bow? Do you seek death?" Marcus's voice was calm, though the silence around him was sharp as a blade. "I mean no insult," he said, "but I cannot understand a bond formed in fear. If no one dares to see the princess's face, how can you know her heart? How can you call it a bond?" Gasps filled the chamber. No one had ever spoken such words. The emperor's hand twitched and the guards shifted, their weapons half raised. But the princess lifted her own hand and the hall stilled. Her voice was soft, but it carried clearly. "Let him speak." The crowd froze. Even the emperor did not move. Her voice was rarely heard, and when it was, none dared to disobey. Marcus's heart pounded, but he stood firm. He looked at her veil, at the faint outline of her face hidden beneath it. "If a veil hides her," he said, "then it hides her from herself as much as from us. I do not believe in curses. I believe in truth. And I will not look away." The torches flickered, as though the hall itself breathed in shock. The princess tilted her head slightly, and for the briefest moment Marcus thought he saw her shoulders rise, as if she had taken in a sharp breath. Beneath the veil, her eyes glowed faintly like two violet embers burning in the dark. A low hiss spread through the crowd. Fear. The emperor's voice was harsh. "Enough, human, you cross a line that no one crosses. If you continue, your life will end here." Marcus's gaze never wavered. "If that is the price of truth, I accept it." The hall trembled with the weight of his words. The aliens looked at one another, some in anger, some in awe, some in doubt. For generations they had bowed, obeyed, and feared. Yet this single human had done in moments what none of them had dared. He had challenged the veil. The princess lowered her hand again, and silence fell. Her head turned slightly toward Marcus, and though her face was hidden, he felt her eyes on him. Something passed between them, something no words could hold. The torches dimmed. The hall seemed to shrink, and for an instant, it felt as though only two beings remained, the veiled princess and the human who dared. And in that instant, the story that would shake two worlds began. The human's defiance. The next day, the alien palace buzzed with whispers. What had happened in the great hall was spreading like fire through dry grass. A human had dared to stand before the veiled princess and refuse to bow. To the aliens, this was madness. No one had broken the sacred law for centuries. Even the emperor himself had only seen the faint outline of his daughter's face beneath the veil. Never more. Now a single human, young and reckless, had done what their bravest warriors never dreamed of. Marcus did not hide. He walked openly through the palace corridors. His steps were calm, but everywhere he went, eyes followed him. Some looked at him with disgust, others with quiet admiration. The guards tightened their grip on their spears as he passed, and still he did not bow. That evening, the court gathered again. The emperor sat on his black throne, iron crown heavy on his brow, his face carved with anger. The princess stood beside him, silent and veiled, her hands folded as always. Torches blazed. The hall was full. "Human," the emperor said, his voice deep and cold. "Your defiance shames you. Do you think yourself braver than my people? Do you think you are stronger than our law?" Marcus stood at the center of the hall, unshaken. His voice was steady. "No law should bind truth. If a bond is real, it cannot be formed in darkness. I do not see courage in looking away. I see fear, and I will not build my life upon fear." A rumble of outrage filled the chamber. Alien nobles hissed and shouted. "Kill him!" some cried. "Strike him down before he curses us all." The emperor raised his hand and the hall fell silent. His eyes narrowed. "If you are not afraid," he said slowly, "then prove it. Tonight you will enter the ritual chamber. You will stand before the princess. You will look if you dare, and you will pay the price." Marcus's heart beat hard in his chest, but his face did not change. "I accept." A gasp rolled across the hall. The nobles looked at one another, unable to believe what they had heard. No one accepted such a challenge. To them it was death, but the human had not even hesitated. The emperor leaned back in his throne, his lips curling in something between anger and curiosity. He had hoped the human would break, would beg for mercy. Instead, he had agreed as if it were nothing. The princess turned her head slightly. Beneath the veil, her eyes burned faintly violet. She did not speak, but Marcus felt her gaze like a hand on his skin. For a moment, he wondered, did she want him to look? Or did she hope he would turn away? The ritual chamber lay deep beneath the palace, carved from black stone, lit only by torches that dripped wax onto the cold floor. That night, guards escorted Marcus there, their armor clinking with every step. None spoke to him. None looked at him directly. When the heavy doors closed behind him, the air grew still. The princess was already there, waiting in silence. Her veil glowed faintly in the dim light, her figure unmoving like a statue carved of silver and shadow. Marcus's steps echoed as he walked closer. The room seemed to shrink around him, pressing in with silence. He stopped a few feet away. The guards stood at the walls, watching, ready to kill at the emperor's command. The princess lifted her chin slightly. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice low and soft but steady. Marcus answered without pause. "Because no one should live behind a mask. Not even you." For a long moment she was silent. The veil shimmered faintly in the torchlight. Then, with slow and careful movements, she raised her hands to the edge of the veil. The guards stiffened. The air grew sharp, almost alive. The veil shifted. Marcus's breath caught. He was about to see what no one else had dared to see, but then she stopped. Her hands trembled faintly before lowering again. Her head bowed. "You are not ready," Marcus frowned. "Not ready?" Her voice was a whisper. "When you look, you will not only see me. You will see the truth of my people, and once seen, it cannot be forgotten." He took a step closer, his voice strong. "Then let me carry it. I am not afraid." The guards gripped their spears, ready to strike, but the princess lifted her hand. They froze. Her head tilted as if she were searching his face for something. Finally, she said, "Tomorrow. If you still choose this path tomorrow, I will not stop you." Marcus stared at her for a long moment. The air between them was heavy with something more than fear, something he could not yet name. When he left the chamber, the nobles sneered and whispered. To them, it was only a delay before his doom. But Marcus felt something else. He had seen her hesitate. He had heard her voice tremble. And in that tremble, he had heard not a curse but a plea. He was no longer certain this was only about bravery. It was about her, and he would not turn back. The first glimpse. The night passed slowly. The palace never slept, but that night every corridor hummed with whispers about the human. Some said he was already cursed. that simply standing near the princess would rot his soul. Others believed he was mad, doomed to die before the next dawn. Marcus did not hide. He sat in the guest chamber given to him, the torches burning low, the silence deep around him. His thoughts returned again and again to the princess. Not the veil, not the curse, but the way her voice had trembled. In her hesitation, he had heard something none of the aliens seemed to notice: loneliness. The next day, the Emperor summoned the court again. The black throne loomed over the hall. Nobles filled the seats, their eyes sharp with hunger for what was to come. They wanted to see the human fall, to see the curse consume him and prove the fear that bound them was justified. The princess stood beside the throne, silent as ever, veil glowing faintly in the firelight. The Emperor's voice thundered across the chamber. "Human, today you will face truth. You will stand before my daughter, and if you survive, perhaps we will believe your words. If you do not, your death will remind my people why the veil must remain." The guards dragged the heavy doors open. Marcus stepped forward. His boots struck the stone floor with steady rhythm. His eyes never left the princess. The crowd hissed, "Fool! Madman!" "He will die." But the princess raised her hand and silence fell. Without a word, she turned and walked down into the lower chamber. Marcus followed, guards at his back, nobles leaning forward with hungry eyes. The ritual chamber was colder than before. Torches burned low, casting long shadows across the stone. The princess stood in the center, her veil silver against the darkness. Marcus stepped closer until only a breath of space stood between them. Her voice was soft. "Do you still choose this path?" "Yes," he answered. Her hands lifted slowly, each movement deliberate as though weighed down by centuries of fear. The veil shimmered as her fingers touched its edge. The chamber seemed to grow tighter, as if even the walls were waiting. The veil fell. For the first time, Marcus saw her face. It was not horror. It was not madness. It was beauty that struck like lightning, so sharp it almost hurt to look at. Her skin shimmered faintly as though woven with threads of light. Her eyes burned with violet fire, not cold but alive, full of depth and silence and sorrow. Marcus's breath caught in his chest. She was not cursed. She was something more, something her people feared because they could not understand it. The guards gasped. Even they, who had sworn never to look, could not stop themselves. Some stumbled back, their weapons shaking. One fell to his knees, unable to hold her gaze. But Marcus did not turn away. He met her eyes fully. The princess's lips parted, her voice barely a whisper. "You see me, and you do not fall?" "No," Marcus said softly. "I see you, and I do not fear." Her eyes widened, and for the first time in her life, someone looked at her not with terror, but with truth. The chamber trembled, not from her, but from the voices above. The nobles shouted in fury. "Blasphemy! He should be dead. Kill him before he curses us all." The Emperor rose to his feet, his face carved with rage. "Enough! Guards, strike him down!" But the guards hesitated. Their hands shook. Some dropped their weapons. None dared step forward. The princess turned toward her father, her veil now fallen at her feet, her face blazing with violet light. "No," she said firmly. "He will not die. Not today." The Emperor's jaw tightened. His voice thundered, "You defy me." Her eyes glowed brighter and her voice cut through the chamber. "You fear me. You always have. That is why you hid me. That is why you wrapped me in silence. But he—" She looked back at Marcus. "He does not fear. And that makes him stronger than all of you." The nobles cried out, the hall echoing with anger and confusion. Some looked shaken. Some looked furious. Some for the first time looked doubtful of their ancient fear. Marcus stepped forward, standing at her side. His voice was clear. "Your law is built on fear. But fear is not truth. Look at her. She is not a curse. She is your princess." The Emperor's face darkened, his hand clenching the arm of his throne. "You dare to challenge my rule, human? You think my people will follow you?" Marcus's words rang out sharp and unyielding. "Not me, her." The hall went silent. The princess lifted her head, her violet eyes burning brighter than the torches. For the first time, she was seen, not as a curse, not as a shadow, but as herself. And in that moment, everything began to change. The dangerous bond. The hall was still burning with noise long after the veil had fallen. Shouts rose, echoing against the stone walls, anger mixing with fear. Some nobles demanded the human's death. Others begged the emperor to seal the princess away forever. A few stayed silent, staring at her uncovered face as though the world they knew had just broken. The emperor's crown gleamed under the firelight, his hand gripping the armrest of his throne. His voice thundered above the chaos. "Enough! The veil will return. The law will not be broken. Guards, take her back to her chamber. And take the human to the dungeons," but the guards stood frozen. The memory of her unveiled face still burned in their eyes. Their arms trembled, weapons hanging loose. None moved forward. The princess stepped closer to Marcus. Her violet eyes glowed, her voice calm but firm. "You fear your own blood, father. You fear me more than you fear any enemy. But this human is not afraid. He sees what you will not." The emperor's fury shook the hall. Silence. Marcus raised his voice, steady and clear. "If she is strong, why should she be hidden? If she is cursed, why am I still standing? You fear her because she is greater than you admit. You chain her because you cannot control her." The words struck deep. The nobles whispered, their voices carrying doubt. The emperor's face darkened further and his eyes burned with hatred. "You will pay for this arrogance, human. And you will pay with your life." The guards finally moved, but not toward Marcus. They shifted uncertainly, some even lowering their weapons completely. The hall was divided, between loyalty to the emperor and the power they had seen in the princess's eyes. The emperor rose from his throne. "Enough games. Tomorrow the human will be executed, and the veil will return, sealed by blood. This defiance will end." The nobles bowed their heads, though unease rippled through the crowd. The guards dragged Marcus away, though not as firmly as before. The princess did not resist as they escorted her back to her chamber. But before the doors closed, her gaze found Marcus's, and something unspoken passed between them, an understanding, a bond stronger than fear. The dungeon was cold and damp, carved into the stone beneath the palace. Chains rattled as Marcus was locked inside, yet even in the darkness his mind was clear. He had seen her face. He had seen the truth hours past. Footsteps echoed. The door creaked open. It was her. The princess stood in the doorway, her veil gone, her face uncovered. In the torchlight, she looked less like a figure of fear and more like something alive, fragile yet unbreakable. "You should not be here," Marcus whispered. "If they find you, they will," she said softly. "But it does not matter. I could not let you wait in darkness." She stepped closer, her hand brushing the chains that bound him. "No one has ever looked at me without fear. No one has ever spoken to me as if I were more than a curse. Why did you?" Marcus met her gaze. "Because fear is not truth, and I would rather die seeing you as you are than live bowing to a lie." Her violet eyes softened, and for the first time her lips curved into something close to a smile. "You are strange, human, strange. And dangerous." She touched the chains. A faint glow spread from her fingers and the metal cracked, then fell away. Marcus rubbed his wrists, staring in quiet awe. "You freed me," he said. "No," she whispered. "You freed me first." The next day the palace was alive with tension. Nobles argued. Guards whispered. Rumors spread that the princess had been seen without her veil. The emperor prepared for the execution, but doubt had taken root among his people. In the great hall, Marcus was brought forward once more, his hands bound, though loosely. The emperor's voice carried across the chamber. "This human has broken our law. Today he will pay with blood. Let his death remind us all of the curse we guard." The princess stepped forward. Her veil was gone. The hall gasped as her face was revealed once more. Her eyes blazed with violet fire. "No," she said firmly. "This ends now." The emperor's rage shook the chamber. "You defy me again?" "I defy your fear," she answered. "I will not live hidden. I will not live as a prisoner to your lies, and neither will he." The nobles erupted, some shouting in fury, others in awe. The guards hesitated, caught between emperor and princess. Marcus stepped to her side. His voice was steady, carrying across the hall. "You fear her power, but I have seen it. It is not a curse. It is strength. And with it, she will lead you into truth, or you will bury yourselves in fear forever." The emperor's face twisted with rage, but beneath the noise of the hall, a shift had begun. Some nobles looked at the princess with new eyes. Some guards lowered their weapons. The empire was no longer united in fear, and at the center of it all stood the human and the princess, bound not by chains, but by something far more dangerous: choice. The choice that changed empires. The great hall was louder than a storm. Nobles shouted, voices colliding like thunder, some demanding blood, others struck silent by the sight of the unveiled princess. Guards shifted uneasily, hands on their spears but without the will to strike. The emperor's fury burned brighter than the torches. His voice thundered above the noise. "You dare stand against me, my own daughter? You dare break the oldest law of our people?" The princess stood tall, the veil at her feet, her violet eyes glowing with fire. "It is not a law. It is a chain. And chains break," the crowd gasped. No one had ever spoken to the emperor this way, not even the boldest generals. The emperor's hand shot up, and guards rushed forward. But this time they did not advance toward the princess or the human. They stopped halfway, uncertain, their eyes flicking between ruler and heir. For the first time their loyalty was torn. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying across the chamber. "You call her cursed because you fear what you do not understand. But I have seen her face and I stand here alive. What curse is this that cannot kill a man who dares look? It is not a curse. It is your fear." The nobles fell into a tense silence. The emperor's jaw clenched. "You think my people will follow a human? You think they will follow her?" The princess's voice rang out, strong and steady. "Not follow me. Follow the truth. If they cannot, then let them live in chains. But I will not." She turned to Marcus, her eyes softening for a moment. "You gave me courage to stand. Now we stand together," the emperor roared. "Then you are no daughter of mine." He tore the iron crown from his head and hurled it down the steps of his throne. The sound rang like a crack of lightning. "Guards, strike them both down. End this rebellion now." The guards hesitated, their spears shaking. The memory of her unveiled face lingered in their minds, not as terror but as something greater. One by one, the weapons lowered. A ripple spread across the hall, uncertainty becoming defiance. "No," a guard said, his voice trembling but firm. "I will not raise my blade against her." Another guard dropped his spear. Then another. Soon a third of the hall had lowered their weapons. Some nobles shouted in anger, but others stayed silent, their faces pale with doubt. The emperor's fury grew wild. He drew his own blade, black steel glowing faintly in the torchlight. "If my people will not obey, then I will do it myself." He charged down the steps, his cloak whipping behind him, his eyes fixed on Marcus. Marcus did not flinch. He stepped in front of the princess, his voice steady. "Then strike me. But know this, if truth dies with me, it will rise again with her." The blade flashed. The hall held its breath, but before the strike fell, the princess raised her hand. Violet light erupted from her palm, not in anger, not in destruction, but in pure force that stopped the emperor in his tracks. His blade froze mid-swing. His body trembled, held by a power too great to resist. Her eyes glowed brighter than fire. "You hid me because you feared this. Not that I was cursed, but that I was stronger than you." The emperor fell to his knees, his blade clattering to the stone floor. The hall shook with silence. The princess lowered her hand, her voice calm. "The age of fear is over." The nobles trembled. Some bowed their heads, unable to meet her eyes. The guards dropped their weapons fully, kneeling. The emperor's power had cracked, and in its place a new presence rose. Not forced, not chained, but chosen. Marcus stood beside her, his hand brushing hers, not in command, but in quiet strength. The bond between them was no longer a secret. It was a challenge to the empire itself. The princess looked out across the hall. "Those who wish to live in fear may keep their chains, but those who seek truth will walk with me." The crowd shifted, torn between centuries of law and the power of a single moment, and slowly, one by one, heads lifted. Eyes met hers without turning away. The emperor sat broken on the floor, his crown at his feet, his rule undone. The hall was no longer his. Marcus exhaled, his chest heavy but steady. He had not come to claim power, but he knew what had begun. A human and a veiled princess had broken a law older than memory, and in its place they had planted something new. Not fear. Not curse, but choice, and in that choice 2 worlds would change forever.